You may see these insane trees online and wonder, how in the world are people making those when mine look like this? Well, that's exactly what I'm going to break down for you today. After watching this video, you're hopefully going to know exactly how to analyze your reference, how to use different AXIOM tools and bring your vision into Minecraft. The very first thing you should do is pick a reference. I'd recommend to scroll through Google Images or Pinterest, or even take pictures of cool trees you happen to see outside. I picked this one for today's video. Let's get right into it. To teach you how to choose scale and how to approach huge size differences, I'm going to be building this one in two different sizes. Step 1. Analyze the tree shape and size. I'll be starting with this juniper tree. At first glance, its silhouette almost feels like something straight out of a fantasy world. So maybe later on we'll even lean into that with a fantasy style gradient. Now let's properly analyze the tree structure. To do so, take your reference into any drawing program so that you can get a better understanding of its proportions. The first step is to trace all of the thickest parts of your tree. Figuring this part out, especially when the branches move towards or away from the viewer, is key to getting the proportions right. To showcase this, I'm using red to showcase what's closest to you, orange to showcase the middle ground, and yellow to showcase what's the furthest back. Notice how I'm first marking everything that's visible to me, and then I continue to interpret where the branches could go within the leaves. By doing all of this, we can identify the most significant attributes of our tree. First, the first major split happens at about 1/7 of the tree's total height. From there, we get these beautiful intertwining shapes running up along the trunk. Second, the main trunk itself ends at about roughly 2/5 of the tree. And from that point on, all the smaller splits start forming the crown. Third, in terms of proportions, the tree is about as tall as it is wide. And finally, this is important, the branches don't grow straight. They bend, twist and change direction multiple times along the way. Not everything can be brought into Minecraft, therefore I'm just marking all the standout direction changes. With some practice, you'll develop a feel on what works and what doesn't. One really nice thing about this tree is that the structure is clearly visible. That's because the leaves grow at angles somewhere between vertical and horizontal, which exposes a lot of the inner life of the tree. If you're new to this, feel free to use it as well. With that, let's bring all of that into Minecraft. Step 2. Build the stem. Since we already covered a mid-scale tree in last video, this time we're going to make both a small and a massive version for this one. Starting with the small version, we're going to use walls, fences, fence gates and glass planes only. To preserve some of the tree's detail, I will have to upscale it slightly. Going any smaller will cost you more and more attributes. I like to follow this recipe. First, build up the trunk. Second, add all the main branches, meaning the ones that we marked on paint. Third, add secondary branches once you're satisfied with everything else. So let's get our marked main branches laid out first. Now, how do we do that? Here's some helpful advice. Use fence gates for horizontal and almost horizontal branches, and walls and fences for vertical branches. Let's start with this one. It goes from here to here. So let's lay out the shape. Just place some walls at an angle. Don't worry about leaving gaps at this stage. Focus on getting the main shape right. We can always connect everything later using glass planes or trapdoors. And if I know an area will be completely covered by leaves, I'll sometimes leave gaps entirely, because they honestly don't really matter. Mostly, I like to do changes once all of the other branches are in place, so let's put them in. I'm mostly just using fences and fence gates to lay out the approximate shape. I don't really care about any gaps at this stage. I will make them look prettier at some later point. The idea is to get everything that we drew into Minecraft first and then make it look prettier. This is looking pretty good so far. Oh, wait. Yeah, this is most likely going to happen to you, so be careful and check all different angles. Personally, I noticed 3 spots where the tree gets very dense and has a lot of extra splits, so let's hit those by placing some more fence gates and fences. Once the structure is in place, we can start adding a bit of shading. At this scale, I'd avoid strong color contrasts. They don't blend very well when the build is this small. I'm trying to get darker the higher I go up in the tree, although I don't really like the initial gradient and I will be changing it later. This very same rule applies for all of your other branches. So here's my gradient that I made with fences, and the higher I go up, the more I try to darken everything I do. Now here I'm adjusting the gradient of the main stem because I felt like the contrast was too far away from all of the branches. With that done, we can move on to step 3, adding leaves. I like to start by laying down a foundation with a 20% leaves, 80% air, sphere, well-tilted brush with sizes varying between 2 to 3. I try to click on the very tips of the branches since that's where leaves grow. After that, I close all remaining gaps manually. The next step for our small tree is auto-shading the leaves with AXIOM. A lot of you have been asking for a more in-depth guide on AXIOM, so I'm going to be doing just that. First, select the area that you want to shade. For this, I'm creating a tool mask using the block in question, in this case oak leaves. Then I choose the freehand select tool and just click on the tree. Then I go to Operations, Auto Shade, select Custom Pattern, and instead of using a preset, we'll make a new one. We will be using azalea leaves, oak leaves, spruce leaves and birch leaves. Maybe I would change oak leaves to jungle leaves, I'm not sure so far. Now adjust the percentages. Since I want azalea to define the highlights, I'll keep its percentage very low. And because a shadow's darkest area is where it starts, not where it ends, we'll be putting spruce before birch. That's it. Now move to the position of your fictional light source and run auto shade. I like to run a few different perspectives until it looks good to me. Afterwards, I like to freestyle a few manual adjustments to polish things up. At this point, I like to incorporate a few standout features of our tree, and to finish things up, I like to use glass, both green and grey in this case, grey for the shadows and green for the highlights. As you can see, in comparison to a regular Minecraft tree, our tree isn't that much bigger really. With this tree done, enjoy the small cinematic. With our small scale tree done, let's see how far we can push this. At this scale, I'll be heavily relying on AXIOM and World Edit. First, I lay out the general shape using World Edit spheres. As I move higher up the tree, I gradually reduce brush size. Once I reach the ends of the branches, I switch to manual building. At this point, I'm honestly just spamming blocks in the approximate direction I want to go for. Just like with the smaller tree, remember to check other angles and correct mistakes at this stage. Once you're satisfied, it's time to start carving. First, blend all the spheres into one continuous shape, by adding and removing blocks all over the place. Try to add those indents and other shapes that you spotted on the tree. Overall, this process is hard to explain with words. I constantly look back and forth between Minecraft and the reference image, adjusting things until they simply feel right. When that's done, jump into AXIOM, select your stem, create your custom gradient and auto-shade the stem. It doesn't need to be perfect, manual fixes are almost always required. In this case, we'll be going with these nice dark brown colors. Here's what I check after every time I auto-shade. First, I look underneath branches, on the side of the trunk, farthest away from the light source, and at the base of new branches. Make sure there's a proper shadow there. Second, make sure AXIOM hasn't shaded surfaces that should remain neutral. Third, ensure the tree gets slightly darker as you move upward. And last, add highlights to emphasize the tree's shape, especially in complex areas. For example, this intertwined section really needs some carefully placed highlights to make the form readable. With that done, we can add more manual branches. Here I'm trying to follow the general trend of the tree, which means we have branches growing upwards, as I explained at the beginning of the video. As promised, I'm going to lean into a magical gradient. So for the sake of that theme, I'll show you a fun little trick to add some magic to your world. Since our trunk has this natural crevice, I'm going to add a little magic effect down there. Now let's get to the leaves. As promised, we're going for a fantasy style gradient. First, I pick any block and roughly outline the shape of the crown by placing blocks mid-air. Since many struggle with this, here's a more in-depth explanation. The blocks placed around the branch should roundabout add up to a sphere. If there's another branch nearby, place 1 to 2 blocks shifted slightly in that direction. In the end, step back and take a look if they span out in the same areas as your reference. With that done, I use a 50-cent block, 85% air, size 6 well-deaded brush, and click on each of those blocks to get a first impression of the crown's volume. If something feels off, this is the perfect time to remove or adjust blocks. Now for the fun part, choosing the gradient. If there are any available, make sure to choose transparent blocks, except glass, since we're going to be using that for highlights in the end. Also remember, as counterintuitive as it may seem, to not put the darkest block in the end, rather like 1 or 2 blocks before the end. As you can see in the bag, I went through many different versions and gradients, and I didn't really like how they looked. So here's what I finally came up with. Looking back at the red wool only tree, I realized that I actually kind of liked the color scheme there, so I went for a reddish gradient. To finish things off, as always, I was using glass. In previous versions, I felt like glass was disrupting the shape of my tree. This is because I was using quite a lot of it and it blurred everything together, which is usually what I'm trying to go for, but in this case it didn't really work for me. If you enjoyed this tutorial, maybe consider subscribing. It's free and you can always change your mind. And if you enjoyed my trees, you could check out my Patreon, link in description. I have some free schematics on there for you. Also, let me know in the comments what you would like to see next, and I'll see you in the next one.